started. There we go. Happy Monday, one and all, everyone. Welcome to lecture number 20. We have been on such a journey, Coder friends, Coder fam. We've been through a lot. And it has all led up to here, to seeing Jerry Springer right there cross that finish line with all of us, with our eyes, Seinfeld, something like that. My dad always watched it. I don't actually know this one at all, but I know he's funny and some people find him funny. I have an unpopular opinion, which I will not share, so I can keep all of your respect for a little bit longer here to at least get through the lecture. So we are all crossing this line here together today. So I'm very excited. So just remember everything that we've learned. Even though our eyes might be burned out, our retinas are gone, just know that Unit 1 is almost over. And today we're going to be learning that last bit of information and stuff we need to kind of know for Angular. So Angular Part 3. So let's go ahead and hop into everything. As always, we're going to start with assignments here. And I think you all know at least one of them coming up, and it is, of course, the first one here. All assignments, calling all assignments due on 3/31 at midnight. That is Thursday of this week. It's coming up at 6 p.m. I know what I just said might be causing you, some of you sweats, but relax, take a breath. You still have that time to complete any of the assignments that you need to. To get across that line, reach out to your colleagues, reach out to your TAs, and reach out to me to get those questions answered. So that is all due at 3/31. Now, do you have to have ones across the board right at midnight and you're then kicked out? No, we are not robots. But make sure that you know that you have your TA knowing that all of your stuff is in and they need to grade it. But again, just like Clark said, do not wait for the last minute. That is the most dangerous thing you could do. You have invested so much time up to this point. Do not wait for the last second at the risk of not being able to get into Unit 2 because something didn't get graded. Get it done today, tomorrow. Do not wait for the last minute. And if you have those questions, reach out sooner rather than later. We are getting down to that last few minutes. All right. That being said, catch-up day is Thursday. So this is the last time you'll be seeing my face for a little bit. So tonight it is a typical lecture on Thursday. As you already know, you've been through a couple catch-up days. Go ahead and just hop right into those small groups. I will not be available on Thursday. So if you do reach out to me, I will probably not respond. Just an FYI, I will be out of town. So Wednesday, I will be in town. For any of those students that have already scheduled time with me, I'll be reaching out to you if there is one on Thursday. I apologize. I think there's one out there. We'll be talking later to get that all situated. And then finally, we have studio review tonight at 8. Feel free to join. As always, I will be recorded if you can't. I know it does get late. Awesome. That being all said, any final questions before we hop into part 3 today? Anything at all? All right. Then let's explore everything we've been through together. All right, from the top, how do I create a variable pet name with the value of Bella?
Pet name equal Bella?
Pet name.
There you go. Just remember, just think about lecture number 1 when I asked you that question. I saw tears in the crowd. Now that's like nothing. You're able to put out these variables like it's absolutely nothing. Very good. Let's keep getting a little bit harder now. How would I create a message variable using pet name that says my pet's name is Bella?
Let message.
I'll take that. Equals. What is it going to equal? What are we going to create here?
A string with my pet
What kind
name.
of string? What kind of string? Anybody got a certain name of string that they want to call out there? Call out to make.
Template literal.
Absolutely, a template literal, because we want to use a variable inside of the message variable that we're creating. So we're going to create a template literal. How do I start doing that?
Backtick.
Tick. Curly bracket.
No, back.
Name.
No, the ticks, right?
We start with the tick. Very good. And I'll add the rest of that in there. We do the tick. My pet's name is, and then we want to
Curly
actually add the
brackets.
information.
A dollar sign.
Dollar
Very good.
sign.
A dollar sign and then our curly brackets. And what goes inside those curly brackets?
Pet name.
Pet name, the variable we want to do. We can also do some JavaScript expressions in there as well. So very good. And then we end it with a tick, of course, a semicolon. Awesome, awesome. Those temperate literals there. It's the one thing we kind of forget about on the end. It's not something we use all the time, but we remember it's there. So that's good. Now let's get even more fun. We're gonna bring this for loop here. Now, take a look at this for loop. You are all now human compilers. And if not, you are working your way there, and we are getting very, very close. So looking at this human compilers out there, how many times does my message get displayed? We're all human records right now.
Right? Pet name is only once.
2 times.
2 times.
Oh,
This is a fun one.
It will run 5 times.
Yeah.
I'm so
4
confused.
times.
2.
All right, so let's take a look at this for loop. The for loop is saying let I equal 0, so our I starts at 0. Nothing's new there. Pet name dot length. Pet name is a string, which can be thought of an array. The length of Bella is what?
5.
5.
5. We will be looping 5 times in this for loop. The if statement is then there. The if statement is saying for every letter, we need to check if it's what letter?
L.
L. And then if it is L, what do we do?
Cancel
Cancel
that
that.
message.
Very good. So I'll ask you again, how many times will this message be shown?
Twice.
Very
times.
good. It will be shown twice. Our output would be my pet's name is Bella and my pet's name is Bella. Look at that. We deduced it all the way down to what is actually going to happen when we run this code. That, as developers, is what we have to do every day. We have to always be checking our code and know in our head exactly, at least to a certain spec, what our code's going to do when it's ran. So that's what we just did there. You human compiled in your brain and you know it's going to happen. We got to go step by step because code goes sequentially. You should always know what's going in our timeline. Awesome. So this is what we started with. Let's move on here. When we got to the next portion, HTML, which 2 tags will only go between our HTML tags? 2 of them.
Head and body.
Head and body.
The head and the body. The only 2 children our HTML tags will ever see. The head and body. Remember, the head is for what is the data behind the website, what your data or what your website stands for. It's title, metadata, so that your Google searches or whatever search engines out there can find what your site is all about. So it's basically the personality of the site. But then we need to actually see what content you want to show, and that goes into the body. Very good. Let's continue on here. How would we retrieve this element in JavaScript?
Wait. How would you
You're doing
Get
get
element
element
by
by
ID.
ID.
Get element by ID.
ID equals main paragraph.
Very good.
Main
Absolutely
paragraph.
right. Absolutely right. We need to set it to a variable, so I called it paragraph LE, which is just short for element there, equals get element by ID, which I did forget something there. It should be document.get element by ID. I apologize for that. And then inside of it should be main paragraph, or the ID of the element you're trying to retrieve. So we're good. So now we're able to create HTML. We're able to get it in JavaScript. And once it's in JavaScript, like we've learned with Angular, we can manipulate it. We can do something with it. So in order to do that, though, to get these elements, which event do we listen to before trying to retrieve these elements?
Add event.
Load.
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 Yeah.
Load. Always, always, always remember, if you're trying to manipulate your elements, you must wait for the page to load before trying to retrieve them, because they aren't born yet. They're not created yet. You can't retrieve them until they're actually created. We go sequentially. Typically, your JS scripts are at the very top. That's where they should be. You need to wait for everything to load, have some patience, and then go get our elements. So always got to remember that. In order to wait for the load event, how do I create that thing that does that?
Add event listener.
That's your add event.
Very good, an add event listener, but who needs the add event listener attached to it?
Window.
Window.
The window. Very good. Window.add event listener load, and then we provide that anonymous function. You guys even know what anonymous functions are? Remember, just take a breath sometimes and just realize how much you know. So this is how we are connecting now the HTML world with the JavaScript world. Now, once we learned that, we moved into something even more powerful because we were ready for it. Even though sometimes we'll maybe like, maybe we were, but we were. I promise, we were. And you guys are tackling it like champs. So The new thing we moved into first was called that TypeScript, that sugar coating on top of JavaScript to give us more protection and constraints. So in order to do that, how would I create my dogs, the values of Toby, Stark, and Bella in TypeScript?
Let my dog
is equal to
is called
Colon.
colon string.
I heard a colon string, and then we're missing something.
You're gonna need brackets. That's an array if you want a
Very
bunch of them.
good. Absolutely right. Excuse me, colon, string, and then open and close square bracket because we're creating an array. We need to tell that it's going to be an array of strings, and this is how we do so. And at the very end, you've already seen arrays before. You start and end with that square bracket, and you place those values inside of it in the double quotes. So Toby, Stark, and Bella separated by commas. And of course, at the very end, we throw a semicolon. Awesome. All right, let's keep moving forward here. Which file would I include this information inside of a component? So if I wanted to place my dogs into one portion of our component within Angular, which file would I do it in?
app.component.ts.
Very
Wouldn't
good.
it be TS, yeah.
It would be the TS file. Very good, Jody. mything.components.ts. So my thing being the arbitrary name, whatever you named your component. It's usually .component, then .ts for TypeScript. That's where we're going to place our TypeScript at. Very good. So continue on, how would I enter or iterate over the my dogs array within an HTML of an Angular component?
You need an ing for.
For
Or,
Very good, I heard it.
NG.
I mean
Absolutely
ng. I say ing, but it's the same thing. Yeah.
So let's take it one step at a time here. I'm going to give us an unordered list with that UL inside of those carets or the pointing brackets. And we're going to start with a list item, so LI. So what was that command that we needed to do?
Star NG4.
Very good. Star ng4 equals, and then what is next?
Dog
Let-
of my dogs.
Let's.
Let
You heard it. Let.
Dog
go ahead
of
and provide
dogs or.
Very good. Yeah, we could do it. Something arbitrary there, but you actually absolutely got it right. So in the quotes, we put let dog, an arbitrarily chosen variable name, of my dogs. My dogs being the actual name of the array above. And then finally, once we have dog there, we need to provide it in this list item. So how do we include information inside of an Angular components HTML file?
The little
What?
double brackets.
Absolutely right. The two double brackets there, two curly brackets on either side of the variable name, dog being that. And then of course we close up our list item. Awesome. Look at this. Yes, you got it all the way through from JavaScript into TypeScript, all the way to Angular. That is how everything here works together. Of course, do we discuss everything? No. But as we can see, all of it works together to create a website that we can interact with. So moving forward just a little bit, just a little smidge more, we're going to go in and bring in this variable here, my input ID colon string equals my ID. Now we're going to place this in the TS file of our component. But my question to you is, how do we set the ID of an input element using this variable inside of the HTML file? So to keep it simple, what would we start with?
Oh, you need the tag.
So you need the tag. So let's go and put input type equals text. We're just going to make it a text box. Just something I chose there. But it's going to be inside of the HTML file of the component. What comes next to complete this task?
Type task. I know this one.
hash my ID.
Hash my ID would actually make this input a variable itself, not necessarily use a variable.
Okay.
Bracket
Anybody?
ID equal to my input ID.
Absolutely right. Very good. Bracket ID equals my input ID. Now let's quickly discuss this real quick. quick. The brackets around ID are indicating that I want the compiler to know that this is something I want Angular to interact with, is the best way to put it. Putting brackets around there saying, hey, ID is an attribute I want to include in input, but I want you to get this from a very special place. And that place is my input ID. My input ID relates to the exact variable name inside of my TS file. These names have to match up. So what makes this magic happen, again, is those square brackets around the attribute's name. This is something very much to note when working with Angular, especially into today's lecture. All right. So any questions up until this point about anything we've discussed? This is a big review to get us going on this. It's kind of cold Monday.
Even type we can have in the bracket.
If you said type, yes, technically you
Yeah.
could put that in the brackets you wanted to, and then you'd have to supply the variable name in there
Okay.
to change the type.
Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely something you could do.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. Let's go ahead and move forward now, and we're going to start hopping into what we're going to be doing today. So, as always, with all of our Angular, we get to do arts and crafts, which is the best part of class, honestly. If you never look forward to art in class or whatever you were doing in either grade school or high school, I don't know what you're doing, but I loved art class because you could just do whatever you wanted. Well, you had to get your art done. But anyway, that's what we're doing today. We're doing some fun old art, and this is the art project we got in store. Now, this was previously what we have created. We saw this from last lecture. The list of adoptable furry friends at the very top, we have our dog and cat we can choose from, and then the list of those dogs or cats, depending on which radio button was selected, is then displayed. Finally, we included an input box at the very bottom. If we click submit, that name was added to either the list of dogs or the list of cats. Again, depending on which radio button was selected. We already have this built. So today we need to add some new functionality. A new functionality we're going to be adding because we now have our pets. We have our website to show people to adopt pets. Let's allow them to actually adopt the pet themselves by adding an adopt button. What these adopt buttons are going to do is that whenever the user clicks on it, it's going to highlight in red, showing that this pet, whether it be a dog or a cat, has already been adopted. So today, this is what we're going to be focusing on. So once we're given a task, like I all just gave you, in any of our coding situations, you will be giving these tasks at a very high level. Let's go ahead and start breaking it down. It sounds like the changes we're going to be doing today are inside of this orange box, which are highlighting basically the list of the dog or cat names with the adopt button. So focusing on that, we already have these radio buttons completed. We already have the input button completed. So today's focus is on the list of cats or dogs. Now, it looks like each individual name being printed out relies on a button being next to it. Now, this is cool. We know that our dog and cat name, if we remember from previous lecture, exists in an array of strings. And we're looping through those to build this. But now we're adding functionality to that name itself, that functionality being, again, this adopt button. When functionality or more complexity is added to something like these little list items, it is typically an indicator that you could possibly make something out of this that could be reusable. That's something, of course, we know to be a component. Because we added this complexity to the dog's name, aka that complexity being that adopt button again, we can now rationalize making this area into its own component. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's go ahead and start hopping into that. I'm going to make sure all that comes over there, and there we go. All right, and also I got to open up my terminal, which is actually up here, so I'm going to do that. All right, I'm going to come down here. I'm going to bring, there we go. Where did you go? Give me 1 second, sorry about that. There we go, now it should work. All right, so as you can see, I'm in my Angular 18 directory. Again, this is where I'm going to be starting. So we're going to be starting up lecture 20 now. If I do a git branch, I see that I'm still on lecture 19. So I'm going to go ahead and create a branch and then check out that lecture 20 branch. So I'm going to say git branch lecture 20. Press enter. Say git branch. And then I see that lecture 20. Lecture-20 branch has been created. So now I need to check that out. How do I actually check out a branch again? What command do I use with git?
Should be checkout.
Check out.
Just check out. Very good. Git checkout and then the name of the branch you just created or whatever branch you want to check out. So in this case, lecture 20. Just like that. We type in git branch again and we should see that then lecture 20 has an asterisk next to it and it is highlighted in green. So cool. We have done a branch, awesome. Now we are in a safe area to explore this new part 3 of Angular. So that being said, what I'm gonna do now is hop over to my code, like that. And we are in our branch of lecture-20, and we are now gonna start coding. Like we said, we want to create a component, before I actually even go over there, we wanna create a component now for this section of the list, aka that dog's name or the cat's name, and the adopt button. To do that, we need to create a component. How do I do that?
NGG, and then generate component.
So G is already short for generate, so we don't need to put it in twice. But you're absolutely on point there with everything else there. So NGG, which is again short for component, and then type in component, and then the name of the component. In this case, I'm going to call it adopt-button. Press enter, and those files are going to be generated. To save us a little bit of time so you don't have to wait for me and asking you all for dad jokes, I'm going to go ahead and type in ngserve now. And while that is all starting up, let's go ahead and start building our button and component here. So when we ran that ng generate, it of course created our adopt button section up here, and our 4 files are now there. Now, what I want to start out with first is the visual portion. I want, and if we go over to our, come on, bud. If we go over to our visual representation of what we need to build here, we see that's the dog's name and then the adopt button on the right-hand side. So that's what I want this component to show. So let's go ahead and start creating that now in our HTML file. We come over here to our HTML file, and we always have that just arbitrary or default value here with that paragraph. I'm going to go ahead and remove that and type in what I want to see. The example I saw specifically was Stark, and then I saw a button next to it. So that's what I'm going to type in next. I'm going to say button, and then close that button because I have no idea what I want to do with it. Now all I want to say is adopt. I'll say adopt me. And then press save. All right, so we say Stark, adopt me. Awesome. I come back over here and I refresh. It looks like nothing has changed. Well, of course not, because we have created the component, but we haven't connected it anywhere. We need to plug this thing in. We need to let it be utilized by our application. So let's go ahead and do that next. Remember that this is a component. So if we go to our TS file, every component is going to have a selector name, how we reference it in our HTML. So app-adopt-button. That's how we're going to call it in Angular. So let's go ahead and find where those lists of dogs and cats were being created. If I remember right, I believe it is in our pet-dashboard component below. And we see that it's for dogs and for cats down here. We no longer want to just pass in the dog's name, but we actually want to create a component every time this is looped over. That's what we were talking about. Now we have this reusable component that we can print out every single time we have a dog being iterated over or a cat being iterated over in this Angular component. So this right here is where I'm going to be plugging in that new component we just built. So I'm going to say app-adopt-button. Now, if you're asking yourself, okay, but you're not passing any data there, I don't understand how things are going to get to it. You're absolutely right. We're going to hold on for a second. We're not passing any data over. We just want to work step by step to get that visual portion completed. So I removed the dog up there, and now I'm going to remove the cat portion and replace it with that component. And then I'm going to save it. Right here is how we're going to add those buttons now to our dashboard that we're going to go back to now. Take a look at this. We see under dog, we have all Starks, and under cat, we have all Starks. Now, of course, why are we getting this? Because we hard-coded Stark into our adopt button component in that HTML file. So we're always going to get Stark. We're not changing that. But one thing to note here is that if you see under cat, we have 4, and under dog, we have 5. This still indicates something. We're still iterating over the list properly because dogs have 5 and cats only have 4 in their list. So we know that this is still working, even though we're not really getting the visual feedback that we might want. So this is the fun part. How do we exactly get our information into this button or into this new component to display? Well, if you have been going through assignment number 6, we see that there are multiple ways you could possibly pass information. We saw one in our first lecture, but we're going to explore a different one now in this third lecture of how to pass information to inner components. So let's quickly talk about that. Right now, we have created a parent component. We've already been working with the parent component. This is a thing that wraps all the stuff within it. So it's in the outer portion. Basically, think of HTML as your mega parent, your great-great-great-great-great-grandparent. Everything wraps inside of it. The parent component we're talking about right now in this example is the pet-dashboard component. So that's our parent component in this case. We have the radio buttons there, and we have the input box there as well. But now we just introduced something new. We introduced another component. That component we're going to refer to as the child component. That child component being the pet's name and the adopt button. Now, as you could probably infer, the parent and child relationship works in which the child is inside of the parent, aka it is further down the hierarchy, if you will, than the parent. So we utilize a child component inside of the parent component. So if you hear child and parent components, this is what we're talking about. That hierarchy of that the child is more inner in the application itself than the parent. So this is their relationship, but our challenge right now is to understand how can we get information to this child component? What information do we even want? Well, if we want to put information to the child component, the one that we specifically want, if we're looking at this example right now, is the pet's name. We need to be able to send over our pet's name so it actually renders in this component. Because if you remember right now, it's only Stark being shown on our application. We don't always want it to be Stark, even though I'm very biased towards it. We want the individual pet's name. So that being the case, how do we do this? In order to pass information to a child component, we use a very special annotation or decoration, however you want to refer to it. That decoration that we typically use in Angular itself is very Angular specific, is called the @input decoration here. This decoration will go inside of the TS file of the child component that wants to accept or take that input information. So in this example that we're talking about, we're going to be calling it the dog's name, or in this case, I apologize, I'm going to be referring to it as the pet's name. So here is something very, very important that we just noticed. This decoration. This is attaching or allowing unidirectional information flow into your child's component. So this allows us to accept data from our parent. Always listen to your parents, and this is one way to do to it. So let's go ahead and implement this now in our TS file. So we're going to come back over to our adoptButton.ts because this is the child component that we're referring to. And this is the one that wants to accept the information. Again, what information do we want to accept from our parent?
Dogs and cats names.
Very good. So in this case, I'm going to call it the pet name here, and it's going to be a string. Now, one funny thing about the input tag here is that sometimes you need to, well, all the time, you need to make sure that it actually gets imported from the Angular/core file, or excuse me, package. So make sure input is there. If it has a red squiggly under it, it just means that it hasn't been imported. Next, after that, make sure you do open and close parentheses. So this right here is how we can start saying, I want the pet's name. Now, it's your child being a very needy individual saying, I really, really want pet's name. But your parent's like, the parent in the end is always the decider. If or if not, they are going to provide that information. Yes, coding is just like the real world. So let's go ahead and figure out how can we pass information to our children from the parent. We have the child's side set up. Let's get the parent side set up. To do that, we need to go to the parent component. Like we said in this example, that parent component is the pet-dashboard component.html, or just in general, the pet dashboard component. I want to refer to it like that. In here is where our child is being used, this adopt button component here, and also below, of course, for the cat section. It is in these spots where we can include the information we want to pass to our child. So how do we do that exactly? You've already seen an example of how we pass information using Angular in our previous examples when we were going through our warm-ups. What was the symbols that we start with to start passing information into, into our elements? Does anyone remember? We wanted to set that ID dynamically.
What do you?
Hashtag.
Remember the hashtag is to
Curly
set.
brackets.
It's the
So they're
curly
the
bracket.
double
Curly
curly
brackets.
bracket thingies and then there's the square bracket thingy. So I don't know which one you're.
Absolutely. So
I
the
think
square
it's
bracket
the
is
double.
Double curly bracket.
I love it all. So there are, I guess, in your all's defense, there's many ways to pass information into things. So let's go through them real quick. The hashtag, again, is to make something a variable within your Angular component. You typically do that within inputs. So you'll do input type equals text, hashtag your variable name, and you can use whatever's in that input elsewhere. The double brackets are to insert information from your TS file into the HTML right there. One step beyond that is including information inside of elements. In order to do that, we use the square bracket. The square bracket, as we remember from the example, we would say ID equals whatever my ID is. This was from our previous example. This is the methodology in which we are going to be passing information to our child. So let's go ahead and do that now. In order to pass information to the child, we need to include the name of the input variable inside of those square brackets. That input variable is dog name, while this refers to as the variable on the parent side. The variable on the parent side that we want to pass in is the dog variable we created in the ng for loop. So inside of the quotes of that attribute, again, that has the square brackets around dog name, we say dog. And then we save that. So this is how we can pass information now from the parent to the child. And that child is wanting that input passed to it. So if we do this and we refresh our page, oh, I had to go save my child component. That'd be nice. Oh, pet name. Oh my gosh, Kyle. Jeez. It should be pet name. No one corrected me. What the heck? Come on, guys. Help me out here. It should be pet name. Excuse me, not dog name. Trying to hide my bias towards dogs. There we go. Now it's back. And we see that nothing still has changed. So nothing has changed because we are passing information. All the information is being passed around. That's fine. But we still have not displayed this change here. So let's go ahead and do that. Hypothetically, under the adopt button, under the HTML here, we have the information flowing in here, but Stark is still hard-coded here. So what do we need to put here to complete this task at hand?
Curly bracket.
I heard it. The curly brackets, very good. And then inside of here, hopefully I don't mess up this time, pet name, the name of the variable that exists in the adopt button TS file. We press save. Perfect. We come back over and take a look at it now. We see Stark, Bella, Zeus, Zoe, and Toby for dogs, and then for cats, oh, we need to include that as well. We see that nothing is passed back here, and that's true. We aren't passing anything back because, again, I'm so sorry, my dog bias is showing. We only supplied the information for the dogs, but not for the cats below. So we need to include that attribute down here as well. So I'm going to copy it, paste it into here, and pet name dog doesn't exist down here in this context. It is actually cat. So I place cat here instead. Once that's completed, come back over here, make sure it's refreshed properly. We see dogs are good, and then we see cat, Winston, Stella, Dexter, and Giffy there. So remember, this information, these cats are coming in from our TS file here under the this dogs and this cats are class variables for these two. So that's why we're seeing those names. So remember our button TS, or sorry, I'll go to the HTML, or what am I doing? I want the pet dashboard here. And then these are the two things we did. Awesome. All right. Any questions up until this point? How we're passing information into a child from a parent?
Yeah, so couldn't you, instead of having a different, like, instead of setting up the HTML twice and changing which which elements get displayed, couldn't you just, now that it's data driven to the list of the dogs or cats, you could just have the show dogs Boolean change which pet list is getting sourced to the change which pet list gets passed to that list, to that ng4.
So yes, you technically could. If you want to just do the show dogs and do a conditional inside of there, you absolutely could. You're looking at our HTML file here. Not CSS. There you go. So yeah, if you wanted to write some kind of conditional there for the ng4, or well, depending what you wanted to do with that, and technically you could. I think a nice way to do that. It might get a little messy, but I believe technically you could.
Well, if you just had like an extra variable that was like pets, and that's like an alias, and then you can set the pets, you can either make pets point to dogs or cats, and then pass pets in there.
Yes, but you technically are duplicating your data, meaning that your dogs array will exist at one point in two locations. So your pets variable and your dogs variable. So you're duplicating your data. So you typically want to stay away from that. So there still might be a way to do.
Wouldn't it just make a reference and not a copy?
True in some sense, but you still don't want to have a copy of your information in two different variables. That's not only, you don't want to duplicate that kind of effort, and also you will have to now manage two reference points to make sure that they're always up to date with each other. So though it will work, I would highly recommend against that type of practice because it puts more work on yourself as a developer. And then instead, you want to usually use flags for that kind of stuff if you do want to work with that, where it's just Booleans and it tells you what gate to go through. So you will typically want to stick with more conditional approaches like so before you kind of do that. But again, that practice will still work. There's a million ways to paint a picture. I would just say that maybe you would not want to explore that for that kind of reason. But that was a very good question, Raiden. Absolutely. No, good to explore it in general. That's just my 2 cents. So take it with a grain of salt. I'm not a perfect human. All right. Any other questions about what we saw?
I'm just wondering if I could take a look at your screen, your local host.
Oh, the
main. Yeah, so I have next to dog and cat, I have an adopt me button. And I'm just going through trying to figure out what I did, but you don't have one. That's what I wanted to see.
Right. So make sure your dot buttons are always within your loops and within the divs, depending on how your example looks. Any other questions? All right. Then let's keep on going. The hardest part about the whole entire lecture here, do you all really know history? Let's find out. In 1919, Boston was the site of which deadly event that involved 15-foot waves that demolished everything in its path?
Was that the molasses flood?
I love it. It absolutely was. Yes, very good, Raiden. Boston molasses disaster, in which that, I believe it was 2.5 tons of molasses broke from a tank and just destroyed Boston, killing multiple people, injuring hundreds, and destroying the entire town. The only reason why I know this is because I had to read this book in like 4th grade. Why they made a 4th grader read about this disaster, I don't know. But it was like a nice illustrated one. I was like, as a kid, I was like, wow, that sounds really tasty. Like, but did not know it was absolutely like devastating to that city. So yeah, right?
Did you read like the I Survived book?
Yeah.
I don't remember what the title was. I really don't. I just remember the pictures. That's how much of a child I still was.
There's an I Survived book about it, and I knew that answer solely based on that.
Awesome. I'm happy people know about this. I forgot
They're
about
really
this
good. I saw those books too. They're really good and compact.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one that really doesn't get taught that much because it's just a molasses thing, but it's actually pretty crazy. All right, let's keep going. A really simple one here, right? Who invented the light bulb?
Thomas Edison.
Thomas Edison has the patent, but Thomas Edison was also a kind of a mean creature. Thomas Edison did not invent the light bulb.
Wasn't it Tesla or Tillis? Humphrey Davy.
Tesla actually
did you-
invented AC power.
Wasn't it
You don't
Humphrey
mean-
Davy?
It was Warren de la Rue.
No. Huh.
Warren de la Rue was the original inventor of the light bulb, which his idea was stolen by Thomas Edison when Thomas Edison actually had the patent for it. Though Thomas Edison might have about over 1,000 patents, he did not actually invent most of those technologies. Let's keep going. The last queen of Egypt, Cleopatra the 7th, was actually from which country? Is this a trick question? Anybody know this one?
I would say Egypt.
Was it Rome?
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
It's very close. Yes, it's from Greece. She was from Greece. She was the last queen of Egypt, and she was from Greece. Just came in and took the country over. Look at that. All right. Did I have a fun time looking through like 200 different like historical facts today? Yes. I do not know history whatsoever. Learned some new things today. Like this one, before moving to California to escape Thomas Edison's patents, Hollywood originally existed in which city?
Was it Philly?
I think it's Chicago.
It might not come down to
Brooklyn,
such a
New York.
surprise. It was New York. Yes,
Brooklyn,
very
New
good. I mean, it's
York.
not. It was Brooklyn, New York.
It was Mabel and Max Sennett, and Mabel was the darling at the time. I know all about this, Kyle. And Cleopatra was part of the Ptolemy family, and that's how come they were all over Egypt because of Alexander the Great. I love it.
You
Here's
are
my
invited
trivia.
to my trivia group. You are invited to my trivia group. Where are you? I cannot do this. Yes, very good. So they actually, the patent was owned by Thomas Edison of, I feel like some kind of screen capture device. So they had to escape New York because they were siding with him so much to California, where they were not siding with Thomas Edison, in order to set up camp there so they didn't lose so much money. So yes, it moved from New York to California to escape more of Thomas Edison's retribution. Am I trying to attack Thomas Edison? No, I just found really bad facts that just put him in a bad light. Still a cool guy, I'm sure. Apparently he was more of a businessman.
No, he was a
He
dick.
electrocuted elephants.
He was a total
That's
dick.
true.
But,
He's not a
you
good
know,
guy.
Horrible.
as we see from the Oscars, we don't care about dicks. So
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
anyway.
All right, everyone. That was our history lesson for tonight. So take a breath here. I need to get a drink of water. Yeah, this was a fun one. All right. Let's hop back into let's hop back into what we were doing there. And what we were doing, if anyone forgot, is that we were doing some cool form stuff. So before I just already did my animation, but whatever. We did those adopt buttons. Awesome. But we have still one thing missing. When we click the adopt button, what we wanted to happen was that we want the dog or cat that was selected to show up in red to show that it has already been adopted. So that is what we're going to be doing now. So let's go ahead and hop back into some coding. The adopt button is where the event that just took place occurs. Remember, when we click a button, what happens? An event happens. In Angular, luckily, because of the technology, we don't have to do event listeners so much, but instead we do have to have some kind of additional code in there to tell our button what to do whenever that event occurs, aka the click. So let's go ahead and do that now. So in the adopt button component, when it clicks, I want to call it to a certain function. So who can talk me through how to add an event to a button here in Angular? What do we need to start with?
The parentheses click.
Very good. Parentheses click. Parentheses saying that I want to add some kind of event here for this button when it occurs. And inside this parentheses is the event we're looking for. In this case, again, it is click. So after that, we say equals. And then inside of the quotes, we put the function that we want to be called whenever something happens, this event, aka click. So in this case, I'm going to say toggle is adopted. Has this function been created yet? Absolutely not. But I wanted to put it in there. I just named it. We'll do that portion next. So toggle is adopted. You'll see typically with like yes or no checkboxes, radio buttons, toggled is a common word to place in there or is selected. So if you see toggle there, it means it can go back and forth. In this case, it can only go one way, but I'm still going to use the word toggle. So toggle is adopted. So if I ran this right now, and I clicked adopt me here, what would happen is that I would get an error. The error is saying that toggle is adopted is not a function. The error is absolutely correct. It is not a function. Let's go ahead and create that now. Excuse me, what file do we place functions in?
TS file?
Yes.
The TS file. We're always going to place it below this ng on a init. And so down here, I'm going to say toggle is adopted. Now, the cool thing to call out is that, remember, all of these functions and all the variable contents are only a part of each list item. Each one of these are components. They're individual. They are separated from each other. That means all the information here is separate from each other. They're instances of those class. Remember, we can create multiple dog objects. We can create multiple components like this that all act in their own individual way. Why am I telling you this? Because as of right now, we have a pet name up here that goes to Stark, Bella, whoever. But now we're going to have another variable that says, are they or are they not adopted? So that's what we're going to put in here now. So down here, we need something, a flag, to tell us if or if not this pet has been adopted. So I'm going to say is adopted. And then it's going to be what kind of variable or what kind of data type?
A Boolean. Right?
Very good. Yes, Boolean. We're saying yes or no. I'm going to automatically set it to false because when the dog is in the list initially, it's going to be false. The dog is not adopted. Now, when the button is clicked, I want them to immediately become adopted. We called it toggle here. So technically what you could do is this dot is adopted equal to true. Now this will just always, no matter when the button gets clicked, it will always set it to true automatically. Real quick, I want to take a side step and tell you for toggling, a shorthand way of doing that, if you want to do yes and no, check back and forth, a shorthand way of doing that also is that you can say this dot is adopted with the not operator in front of it. If you take a close look at this, it's not too important, but I always want to show you guys as much as I can with just the small little things that you can put in your code to make it cleaner. This is the not operator, which means it will flip whatever's in front of it. So if is adopted is true, it will see this not operator, the opposite of true is false, and set is adopted then back to false. Same thing. False will set it to true and be assigned to true. This is a nice little way to toggle things quickly. All right. Now that I've fully confused you just with that, let's go ahead and we're going to go test out our application real quick to make sure things are now working. So I press adopt me. I see nothing has changed, but we're not getting that red in the right-hand side anymore. So cool, cool, cool. And Anna, by the way, out there, I did see your question and I'll talk about that at the very end. Joe, I'm a little confused because this dot adoption is false. Yes, up here. This was a design decision, not really for coding techniques, but for design decision. When a dog is added to the list, I'm going to assume it is not adopted because it's an adoption list. So I hard coded it to false. So that's why I set it to false there. So down here, if we toggle it to true, then it'll become true. But every time in every case that we start out, the very beginning, it will be false. Awesome. And one more thing always to do too is that we're going to go ahead and say this dot is adopted. And we're going to console log it. So we're going to come back over here, let it refresh, and press adopt. Look at what it's doing. Isn't that cool? We're toggling back and forth. So if you can see that out there, it says true, false, true, false, true, false, true, false on the right-hand side. Awesome. So we know it's working. Our toggle is working. Our event is clicking. We're doing great. Remember, take these baby steps. As you go into the future, take baby steps. Don't leap too far. That's how you trip and fall on your face. Baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. So we console logged out. We are working. Awesome. So we now know if something is adopted. It will now be set to false or true depending on how it's clicked. We still need to do some styling changes. So like we said, this is the brain of it. It has that data inside of it, whether or not it's adopted. Luckily with this data, as we know in Angular on our HTML side, we can utilize it to do things. Right now, we are not really doing anything over here but showing the pet name. But as we can see, we can take out that information from the TS file and display it. So awesome. Let's go ahead now and do a little bit extra stuff with that data. We've been able to display it, but let's go ahead and make some other decisions about it. So what I'm gonna do is put this stuff in a paragraph. You also place it in a div or something like that. You know, we can place it in a div if we want. We want to do paragraph div, whatever. Whatever you want to do. And so inside of here, when it is adopted, I want my background color to be red. So if I say background color is red, you should immediately think styling, CSS. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to come down here and I'm going to create a class that says, and how do I create a CSS class? What punctuation do I start with?
Period.
Dot.
Very good. Period.
Dot.
Awesome. Period of the dot. Absolutely. And then we're going to say is adopted styling or something like that. This is an arbitrarily chosen name. Nothing crazy about it. And then I'm going to say background color is going to be red. Or I can do hashtag F00. Up to you. I'm going to save my CSS there. Save that too. So it's just there, setting the background color to red, and I should really note my name here of the class. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over to our HTML, and what I want is that when is adopted is true in my TS file, I want this whole thing to be red. So if I just set class here equal to, oh my gosh, I already lost it with it. Wow.
Is adopted styling?
It is adopted styling. Thank you very much. I'm just gonna go copy it so I don't embarrass myself any further. There we go. Save that. We save it, come back over here, and we're gonna see that everything that was now highlighted in red. That's not what we want. We want it on a conditional. So how do we bring information into our Angular components? Well, what we wanna do is we use those square brackets. So that's what we're gonna do here now. To conditionally decide if a class should be on an element, we start with those square brackets. We've seen these multiple times today. So we'll say class dot is adopted styling here, close square bracket, and then is adopted. We'll go through this in just a second. So what I just did is I said I wanted my attribute to be class, and then inside that class, I want it to be is adopted styling. Only if is adopted is true. Only if is adopted is true. So if this is false, it won't set this at all. So very much note that. So let's go ahead and see this in action now. So all that red just went away. When I click adopt me, we see the red comes back. But when I click it again, we see that it goes away. Again, what it's doing is deciding on that conditional or that Boolean inside of our TS file to whether or not to display that background color, that CSS styling that we just created. So awesome. Look at that. We are slowly on our way there. We're able to turn it on and off. But once Stark is adopted, once I adopt Stark one day, God willing, hopefully soon. I got a backyard ready to go. We need the dog. Anyway, when that happens, I want no one else to be able to adopt this dog. So that being the case, we need to allow them not to do so. So what I want to happen in this case is that once I press adopt me and it's redlined, I don't want anyone to be able to click adopt me anymore, this button, for just this button specifically, because they can still do it with Bella. So I need to now edit my attribute for my button to whether or not to be disabled. That's how we can tell if something can be clicked or not on a button. So what I'm going to do here is add one more piece of functionality. I'm going to say open close square bracket disabled equals to is adopted. Again, square bracket is starting to indicate that we're going to be using something from Angular for the attribute disabled inside of our button element. What we're relying on for disabled is our is adopted. Disabled means it will allow or not allow the button to be clicked, true or false. That's why we can use is adopted here. So in this case, we press save here, go back, refresh our page, we click Adopt Me, but if you take a very close look, once you click it, it becomes ghosted, kind of, very, very kind of slightly transparent, and it's not able to be clicked again. We do it for all of these, and we notice that we can do them both individually, but also they all become disabled here as well. So that is that styling attribute that we just saw for the disabled attribute in the button. Now I'm going to pause here before we continue on just a little bit further for any questions that we might have gotten for this. Anything at all? Everyone feeling good? All right. Then let's start getting more confusing. Let's go ahead and we're going to hop into, so now we're able to adopt me, but what if I didn't even want my button to be shown anymore? It's disabled, but I don't even want them to think that they can have Stark for me. So let's completely hide the button. So in order to do that, to hide something, whether it be a button, a div, a paragraph, that's part of our CSS styling. Now, if you're asking yourself, can we just create a class that hides it? Yeah, absolutely. But for this case, it's just one small styling. So let's go ahead and just do it inline. So some inline styling. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and press enter here. It doesn't need it for the coding example. It's just for everyone so we can actually view it a little bit better. I'm going to go and blow up my screen too. This back just a bit. There we go. Oops. Come back over here. There we go. Save that. The next thing I'm going to do is now I want to edit the styling directly in line using Angular's variables that's locked away in my TS file. To do this, we can use square brackets once again. So Angular can use its magic to do stuff. And what I said I want to do is inject styling into this, into this button. So I'm going to start with styles. Look at the styles. Is it style or styles? It says styles right now. No, it's style. Oh my gosh, I just had a brain fart. I was doing this all day today too. It's like even from, yeah, it is. Okay, thank you. It's like, wow, I should know that. It's my day job. All right, style. And then after the style, we need to provide which style. Remember, there's a lot of them in CSS that we want to manipulate. Now, if we want things to see or be shown and not shown, what that's called, if you've never worked with it, is called visibility. So in this case, I'm going to say style.visibility. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say equal to is adopted. Again, that is a true or false. Now, I'm going to save this, and it is not going to work. And we'll talk about it in just a moment, why not. So when I say adopt me, it's going to highlight it in red, it's going to be disabled, but it's still being shown. This is because is adopted is a true or false variable, but visibility wants a string back. Remember in CSS, strings or values are still very common, like background color, you said red, you didn't say true or false. For visibility, it wants a string back, whether to be showing or hidden. So that is what we're going to be, or excuse me, hidden or visible. So we're going to use the is adopted variable to return whether or not it's going to be hidden or visible. To do that, we do a ternary operator. Remember, ternary operators are just fancy if statements. That's all within one line. So is adopted, and to do the ternary operator, you do a question mark, if we remember this. So if it is adopted, then I want it to be hidden. So I do a single quote, say hidden, because it needs to be a string when it's returned. And then that's if it's true. And then for our else statements, we put colon. And then another one is, then another single quote, we say visible. An end single quote there. So remember, this is called a ternary operator. In JavaScript, they exist, and we placed a JavaScript expression right here. This is not Angular specific. It very much goes back to our JavaScript days. Just remember, because we don't use these a lot. So hidden and visible. So let's go ahead and come over here and see what happens. Once we click Adopt Me, we see that the button now fully disappears. What we're doing, again, is using that isAdopted variable to directly manipulate the styling inline of that component or of that element. So we click Adopt Me, the button completely goes away now. So this right here is how we can then change the styling directly in our HTML using those TS variables, all through Angular. Come back over here for a second, and what I'm going to do, just so we can see everything, one line there. If you're asking yourself, is this legal? It is, I promise. Just to get all those attributes there on that one line. Remember, there is a little closing bracket right over here. Just an FYI. So let everyone take a second there. Any questions on what we just saw with that direct styling manipulation? Anything at all? Nope. All right, last chance, because that is all I have for you tonight before we move into the next studio. So any final questions about anything that we've covered at all during this class? I guess all classes. Anything at all? All right, everyone. In
Can we
that
start
case,
over from the beginning?
absolutely. I'll open up lecture number 1. Let's keep going.
Okay, that I can do. We're gonna miss you, Kyle.
Oh, I'm gonna miss you all too. Real quick, just to cross all my T's and dot all my I's there. Hopping back into lecture questions, I did see the question, how long will the lecture recordings be available on YouTube for? So they will always be available. So they will never be taken off. Feel free to use them all the time. If they become unlisted, if I do come back to start lecturing again, I just unlist them just because students will get confused about which era is from, or it's from which era kind of thing. So if you ever just don't see them, feel free to Slack me. Slack stays available. Slack stays online for quite some time. I will always be on Slack, so go ahead and do that. If not, I'm going to go ahead and provide just my personal information, so my email and also my LinkedIn after this. Usually I do this at the end of Unit 2, but I'll go ahead and do it at the end of Unit 1 since we are partying today. If you do request me on LinkedIn, I do ask to just make sure you have launch code in either your activities or somewhere in what you're doing, just because I do get random requests in there, and so I usually ignore them unless I know the individual. So if you have launch code in there, I will absolutely connect you. I'd love to connect with anybody out there. If you're not on LinkedIn, get on there. It's the best thing to do for your career for sure. In the end, everyone, it has been an absolute pleasure teaching all of you. It's just always really, really awesome to see everyone start from day 1 to where you get today. So just letting you know that it is a lot of work, and you're halfway there, and you're going to be getting to Unit 2, and it's going to be more work. But you have made it halfway. It is the most difficult point to get here. Though, yes, there's still stuff you're going to have to learn in the next section. Know that you now know how to navigate launch code. You know what to do. You know who to talk to. So stick with it. You have put in so much effort. You all have been doing absolutely fantastic. And it has been awesome just teaching you all, and you all putting up with me. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Continue on. Feel free to reach out if you ever have any questions. I love just chatting with people at the very end. But thank you guys so much for listening. I'm going to get all teary and everything, but feel free to come back to, if you just don't want to miss a space just yet, feel free to come into studio review and I'll be there also. But other than that, everyone, that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you again for such an amazing class, and good luck in your future endeavors.
Thanks, Kyle.
You too.
It's been a pleasure, Kyle.
Bye, everybody.